What if the person you offered shelter to on a snowy night turned out to be the most powerful person in your life? Someone with the power to give you everything you lost or take it all away. Would you still open your door? The snow was falling again. Not heavy enough to demand emergency warnings, but just thick enough to soak your socks, sting your cheeks, and slow every step. And that was exactly how Ivy Caldwell felt. Slowed down, soaked in worry, and silently freezing inside. Her boots sank into the slush as she passed storefronts glowing with soft holiday lights. Everyone else was hurrying toward something. Warm dinners, smiling faces, the illusion of safety. But Ivy, she had nowhere to go but back to an apartment too cold, too quiet, and now far too uncertain. That morning she'd still had a job. Now, she wasn't even sure she still had dignity. It wasn't like she'd meant to be late, but her mother's blood sugar had dropped again. Ivy had been up since 4:30 a.m., trying to coax her into eating, waiting for the home nurse who never showed. By the time she got to her front desk receptionist job at Cartwell Industries, breathless, sweating, apologizing, Mr. Whitlow was already shaking his head. "Ivy, I like you, but this is the third time. We need people we can count on. My mom collapsed. I didn't know who else to. We're running a business, not a charity." And just like that, she was jobless. Now she was jobless and standing alone outside of a closed cafe on Fairview Avenue, watching her breath curl into the gray winter sky. Her eyes burned, but she didn't let the tears fall. She was too tired, too numb, too hollow. Then she saw them. Huddled under the cafe's awning was a man, tall, rough around the edges, with a little girl tucked under his coat. No stroller, no bags, no car seat, just two figures wrapped in desperation. The girl had dark curls clinging to her cheeks, her nose red, her eyes glassy. She couldn't have been more than 5. She looked up. Their eyes met, and something in Ivy cracked. "You don't know them. You just lost your job. You have nothing to give." But then she heard it, not out loud, but deep in her chest, her mother's voice, like a breath of memory. "If you can give when you have nothing, that's when it matters most." Without thinking, Ivy stepped toward them. "Hi," she said softly, the cold stealing some of her breath. I, I have a small apartment a few blocks from here. It's not much, but it's warm. I made soup this morning. You and your daughter, if you need somewhere safe tonight." The man blinked, then looked down at his daughter, then back up at Ivy. His voice was low, hesitant. "Are you sure?" Ivy nodded. "Yeah." There was a pause, a kind of stunned silence between 3 people who weren't supposed to meet, and yet did. "Thank you," he said finally. "I mean it. I'm Evan, and this little warrior here is Zoe." Zoe didn't speak, but she clung to her dad's hand and gave a small nod. Ivy smiled, holding back emotion. "Hi, Zoe. I'm Ivy. Let's get you somewhere warm, okay?" Ivy's apartment was a patchwork of secondhand furniture, mismatched mugs, and love. It smelled like thyme and garlic, the only spices she had left to give a meal flavor and meaning. The couch sagged, but the blankets were clean. There were books stacked on the floor, mostly her mother's. There was warmth, not just from the space heater humming in the corner, but from Ivy herself. She handed Zoe a thick pair of dry socks and a sweater 2 sizes too big. Evan's hands trembled slightly as he helped his daughter out of her wet coat. He said, "We won't stay long. Just tonight." "That's fine," Ivy replied. "Soup's almost ready." As she moved around the kitchen, Evan quietly walked over to a loose cabinet door and adjusted the hinge until it didn't creak. Ivy raised an eyebrow. "You didn't have to do that," he smiled faintly. "Fixing things keeps my hands from shaking." There was something about him, calm but haunted, tired but kind. Zoe tiptoed over to the stove, sniffing the air with childlike honesty. "It smells like a restaurant," she whispered. Ivy chuckled. "It's just veggie soup with barley, but I'll take the compliment." They sat at the tiny table, slurping quietly, the silence oddly comfortable. After a while, Ivy asked, "So, what do you do for work?" Evan stirred his soup slowly. "Took some time off, trying to figure things out." She didn't press. She knew that tone, the kind of grief you don't name out loud. I was supposed to be in Chicago for journalism school, she offered. But when Mom got sick, I stayed. Took the front desk job, paid the bills, or tried to. Evan looked at her, something like respect in his eyes. That's not failure. That's love. No one had ever said it like that before, not without a trace of pity, and something in her chest, something long dormant, flickered. After dinner, Zoe asked to draw. Ivy pulled out a box of crayons and printer paper. The little girl settled on the rug, humming. Evan stood to help with dishes. Ivy waved him off, but he insisted. As he worked, he silently fixed the faucet and oiled the squeaky drawer. She watched him, trying not to smile. Do you always fix what's broken? Evan shrugged. Only the things I can. That was the first time Ivy laughed that day, and it felt like sunlight cracking through clouds. Later that night, after Zoe was tucked under a quilt, Ivy returned to the living room. Zoe was cradling something. I made this, she said, holding it out. It was a bracelet. Crooked, made from green floral wire and 2 plastic beads. It was lopsided. Beautiful. For me? Ivy asked, stunned. You're the first person who smiled at me today, Zoe said. Ivy's heart shattered. She hugged the girl close, not out of pity, but out of something deeper. Something that made her feel, for the first time in weeks, that maybe she still mattered. That night, she didn't sleep much. She just sat in the quiet, holding the little bracelet, turning it over and over, a scrap of wire, 2 beads, a memory already burned into her soul. But when she woke up the next morning, Evan and Zoe were gone. No goodbye, no note. Just the soup pot washed and dried, the couch cushions fluffed, a handkerchief folded perfectly on the table, and tucked inside. A child's crayon drawing. A tall woman with yellow hair standing between a man and a little girl, all holding hands beneath a sky of stars. It wasn't the end of a night. It was the beginning of something Ivy couldn't name yet, but knew would change everything. What if everyone told you you were too soft to survive, and that softness turned out to be the very thing that saved everything? The days after Evan and Zoe disappeared passed like fog for Ivy Caldwell. She'd wake up, stare at the empty couch, then the drawing still taped to her fridge with a grocery store magnet. Zoe's crayon masterpiece of a family that didn't exist. Or maybe almost did. The bracelet hung beside it, green floral wire and 2 beads, shaped with clumsy devotion. And yet that absurd little thing held more power than any degree, resume, or performance review ever had. Because for one moment, it made her believe she was more than just trying. But belief is hard to hold when reality keeps punching you in the chest. Ivy printed new copies of her resume, highlighted her old receptionist skills, and started job hunting. Again, she stood in lines, filled out forms, forced smiles. But every now hiring sign came with rejection cloaked in corporate language. We're looking for someone with more technical experience. You seem overqualified for this role. Your background just doesn't match the energy we need. At one sleek downtown agency, a woman in pointed heels and a power suit flipped through Ivy's resume for less than 10 seconds. Then she looked up and said, with the kind of cold smile that somehow felt rehearsed, honestly, you seem a little too soft for this environment. We need someone tougher. Too soft. The words stuck to her skin like a rash she couldn't scrub off. As if kindness were a liability. As if heart made you unhireable. She walked out of the building in silence, her coat not nearly warm enough against the wind, her fists clenched in her pockets, her steps unsteady. But her eyes were dry. That night she skipped dinner. Her mother had been asleep by 8, too tired from her heart meds. Ivy just sat in the kitchen, staring at the bracelet again. Too soft. She reached up, her fingers curled around the magnet on the fridge. She was ready to tear it all down. The drawing, the bracelet, the memory, everything. Because hope hurt more than loss. And then she heard the whisper, the soft echo of Zoe's voice from that night. You're the first person who smiled at me today. Her hand dropped. The magnet stayed. The bracelet stayed. But Ivy sank to the floor and finally let the tears fall. Not the quiet ones this time. No, these were ugly sobs, full-bodied grief. She buried her head into her knees, shaking. I don't want to give up, she whispered into the silence. But I'm so tired. 2 days later, the phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something told her to. Hello? She said, voice hoarse. Miss Caldwell? The voice was crisp, polite, professional. This is Natalie from Haven Crest Group. Our CEO would like to meet with you. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. at our headquarters. Ivy blinked. I don't work for you. We're aware, Natalie said gently. But the request stands. He specifically asked for you. By name, her breath caught. Was this a prank? She nearly asked, Am I in trouble? But the woman had already confirmed she wasn't. Still, it made no sense. The next morning, Ivy put on the cleanest outfit she had, black slacks and the only blouse without a stain. She slicked her hair into a bun, grabbed a thrifted purse, and rode the subway in silence. She stared at her reflection in the train window. Pale skin, tired eyes, nerves thrumming beneath every breath. She didn't belong in a place like Haven Crest. Not anymore. The receptionist smiled politely. Miss Caldwell? Right this way. He's waiting. The elevator ride was long and quiet. When the doors opened on the executive floor, it felt like walking into a different universe. Marble floors, abstract paintings, sleek leather chairs. She had once delivered mail to this floor, back when she was just a receptionist. She wasn't ready for who she saw behind the massive glass office doors. Evan, she gasped. There he stood, no longer wrapped in a threadbare coat. Now he wore a navy suit, custom tailored, standing behind a mahogany desk like he was born there. But his eyes, those kind, tired eyes, they hadn't changed. Before she could speak again, a blur of curls sprinted across the room. Ivy! Zoe shrieked, crashing into her knees and wrapping her in the fiercest hug a 5-year-old could manage. Ivy stumbled back, half laughing, half crying. Hi, sweetheart. I didn't know I'd see you again. She didn't either, Evan said, smiling as he walked forward. I wanted it to be a surprise. They sat on a plush couch by the window. Ivy held Zoe close, still stunned, still speechless. She looked at Evan. What is happening? I owe you an explanation, he said gently, and maybe a whole lot more. He took a breath. I'm the new CEO of Haven Crest. Bought it 2 weeks ago. Ivy blinked. What? I've been in private negotiations for months, but after everything that happened with my wife, I stepped back from the public eye. His voice broke slightly on the word wife. She passed in a car accident 8 months ago. After that, I couldn't lead, couldn't function. Zoe and I left everything, traveled, stayed in rentals. I wanted to find out who I was again and what kind of father I could be. The night you found us, that was one of the lowest I'd ever been. Ivy listened, heart pounding. You didn't know me. You didn't ask questions. You just opened your door and gave what you could. He paused, looking her in the eyes. You reminded me that good people still exist. That softness isn't weakness. It's what saves people. It's what saved me. He stood, walked to a drawer, and returned with a slim folder. A job offer. Ivy opened it slowly. Her jaw dropped. Director of Community Wellness? A salary that made her blink twice. Benefits that would cover her mother's full treatment. And more. I don't know if I'm qualified, she whispered. I'm not hiring you for your resume, Evan said. I'm hiring you because when the world gave you every reason to close your heart, you opened it wider. For the next few weeks, Ivy worked like her life depended on it, because in some ways it did. She created programs for employee mental health, parent support, and outreach. She turned the dusty HR corner into a place where people cried and laughed and told the truth. But kindness, even when authentic, doesn't protect you from whispers. She heard them in the halls. Isn't she just a receptionist? I heard she didn't even graduate. Bet she's cozy with the boss. It stung. It burned. It brought back every doubt. One afternoon, she passed the copier and caught a man mutter, I guess saving a CEO gets you more than a thank you these days. She made it to her office before the tears came. Behind closed doors, she collapsed into her chair, hands over her face. They think I'm a fraud. They think I don't belong. Maybe. Maybe they're right. A soft knock broke the spiral. She wiped her eyes. Yes? Evan stepped in. No suit, no clipboard, just concern. He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking her hand. Come with me. That weekend they took Zoe to the park. They pushed her on the swings, flew a red kite. She drew chalk stick figures on the sidewalk. Daddy, Julie, and me. They bought ice cream. Ivy sat on a bench, staring at the cone in her hand. She doesn't see rumors, Evan said softly. She just sees you, who you are. Maybe it's time the others did too. The email went out early Monday morning. Town hall meeting. Thursday, 4 p.m. Attendance strongly encouraged. The subject line alone stirred a buzz across the building. Ivy heard it ripple through the elevator, around water coolers, even in Slack messages pinging like digital whispers. Think it's about layoffs? Maybe another acquisition. No way, CEO doesn't do these things himself. Unless it's big. Ivy tried to stay focused, or tried to keep her head down. But the moment she saw her name under the special acknowledgement section on the agenda, her stomach turned. Thursday came fast. The large auditorium pulsed with half concern, half curiosity. Executives in tailored suits, interns in hoodies, marketing, security, janitorial staff, everyone. The room dimmed, a hush fell, and then Evan walked onto the stage. But not as the CEO. He wore no tie, no tailored blazer, just a soft gray sweater and slacks. He didn't carry a script. He didn't need one. He stepped behind the podium and looked out. Not like a man surveying a kingdom, but like someone about to confess something sacred. Thank you all for coming, he said calmly, his voice carrying across the auditorium like a warm tide. Today isn't about quarterly results or expansion strategies. Today is about a person. He paused. You've all met her. Some of you work with her directly. Others only know the whispers. But I want to tell you who Ivy Caldwell really is. The spotlight shifted slowly until it landed on Ivy, seated in the front row, her hands trembling in her lap. She didn't come to this company with an Ivy League degree. She didn't arrive with a six-figure resume or a portfolio of strategic wins. She came with something far rarer, the ability to change a life with nothing but warmth and soup and decency. He lifted something from his pocket, the bracelet, the same green wire, the same plastic beads. The one Ivy thought he'd forgotten. This, he said, holding it up to the entire room, was a gift my daughter made after the night we spent in Ivy's apartment, when we were cold, homeless, and invisible to the rest of the world. A long, deep silence fell. She didn't know who I was. She didn't ask. She just opened her door, fed us, let my little girl laugh again. She reminded me what leadership should look like. Not authority, not fear, but heart. He gently placed the bracelet on the table beside him. I wear it every day to remember, because without this bracelet, I wouldn't be standing here. And then, louder, more steady. Without Ivy Caldwell, this company would not be what it is becoming. Gasps broke the silence. Then applause, one pair of hands, then another, until it became a standing ovation. Ivy sat frozen, then slowly rose to her feet, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She wasn't crying from embarrassment. No, this was something deeper. Release. Recognition. Finally, she had been seen, not as a mistake, not as someone too soft, but as someone who mattered. That moment would have been enough. But Evan wasn't finished. He turned to the crowd, then turned back to Ivy. The applause softened, then stopped. Ivy, he said, stepping forward, his voice catching. There's something else. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small velvet box. Gasps swept the room like wind through trees. Evan slowly knelt down, right there, on the stage. The moment paused. Time stood still. I came into your life as a man broken by grief, unsure of who he was. You gave me shelter. But more than that, You gave me something I didn't think I'd feel again. Peace. Laughter. Hope. He opened the box. Inside sat a ring. Not massive or showy, but simple, elegant, with a deep sapphire stone wrapped in delicate silver. Understated, just like her. Ivy Caldwell, he said, his voice soft but unwavering. You were our light on a night when we had nowhere to go, and ever since you've been our home. Will you be ours forever? There was a gasp behind her, and a little blur of curls ran forward, leaping into Ivy's arms. Say yes, Ivy, Zoe squealed. I want you to be my forever mommy. Ivy's knees buckled. She dropped beside them both, holding Zoe tightly, her other hand covering her mouth. Her body trembled. But it wasn't from fear. It was from love. Real, raw, impossible love. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The crowd erupted. People clapped, cheered. Confetti rained from the balcony. Someone sobbed. Even the marketing exec who'd once whispered about her stood on her chair, cheering through tears. And in that moment, Ivy wasn't the girl who got fired. She wasn't the girl who didn't finish college. She wasn't the soft one anymore. She was the woman who changed a company with soup, a borrowed sweater, and a heart that refused to harden. The wedding came in spring. Under a pale blue sky, by a quiet lake, Ivy walked barefoot across the grass in a soft ivory dress, her mother holding her arm, tears of joy in her proud eyes. There were no diamond tiaras, no marble halls, just daisies, music, laughter, and one small green wire bracelet on Ivy's wrist. Not as a decoration, but as a vow. That night by the fire, Zoe curled up beside her new parents and whispered, I asked God to send someone like you, and he did. Ivy looked at her, eyes glistening, then at Evan. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. Because this wasn't just the end of a love story. It was the beginning of a life made from the kind of grace most people never believe in. A single act of kindness had echoed into a destiny none of them saw coming. And somewhere in a quiet office, pinned beside a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures beneath a sky full of stars, the bracelet still hung. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was proof. That softness is not weakness. That strangers can become soulmates. That one night can change everything.